So, and we'd be going, ooh, ah, and you wouldn't know.
Prayer. Lord in heaven, it is good to be here. We thank you for waking us up this morning and filling us with your grace. We recognize that all the gifts that you have in store for us come from your gracious hand and the work of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Bless us in his holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I appreciate the invitation to be able to come and talk with all of you today. And I'll be in the worship service too, giving the message as your pastor is away for this week, I guess last week and this week, but he'll be back soon. And today what I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about planned giving. This is most commonly used planned giving tools. My name is Jay Brown. I'm from Legacy Deo. I've been here before. And I was here with Concordia University, Texas. But I've made a switch from last year to this year, working now for Legacy Deo, and we are...
Is your mic on?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Made a switch over to Legacy Deo, working out of the Texas district office, but we actually service 32 states outside of Texas. So it's good to be able to talk with you here today. The guy up here on the left-hand side, you might recognize the guy on the right-hand side. That's, me. But on the left-hand side is our former president of our national church body, right? Dr. Jerry Kieschnick. He's our CEO of Legacy Deo. So what is our legacy? Well, this Legacy Deo business is we're exploring it a little bit. And those two things together is really, the legacy part, right? It's what we leave to the generations beyond us. I think maybe even a little bit more than that. It's also living a legacy. You think of it as your legacy starting now. But when we put the word Deo together with it, we recognize that our legacy actually starts with God, and God is in the center of all that we do. We were talking a little bit before about some of the languages, right before we started. There was a time when people studying for the ministry had to learn German, Latin, Hebrew, and simultaneously. I'm thinking, wow, all right. Well, when I came through, they didn't have the German and the Latin requirements. Instead, they just had the Hebrew and the Greek. They had done away with the German and Latin requirement. So Latin, though, we use that Deo word in our name, Legacy Deo. And I'm told, even though I didn't study the Latin myself, that that is Latin for God and denotes that special relationship with legacy where He is in the midst of our legacy, responsible for it and active in it and all that we do. And our legacy is certainly what we do with His gifts. And not just financially, but also our talents and what we do with our time. It's important that we manage these as good stewards of what He entrusts into our care. And so, Legacy Deo, let me tell you a little bit about how we got started and what we do. Back in the late 50s, there was a family that was so generous, wanted to give a ranch, a whole ranch to the church. They said, and the church said, wow, how generous of you, how wonderful that you would do this, for us, and give the gift of this big ranch. What are we going to do with a ranch? They said. And so Legacy Deo was formed with four gentlemen getting together with the primary responsibility of disposing of this asset, liquidating the asset to make sure that they can then turn it over and give it to the church. And it's not quite as easy as just, there's a lot to it that goes on. So really, they needed to form this organization. Then Lutheran Foundation of Texas, but later it was changed in 2017. We rebranded a little bit to Legacy Deo because, well, we're more than just Texas. We service the 32 states outside of Texas and people therein. And also, the idea of a foundation. Some people get the idea that we're some great big foundation like the Gates Foundation or the Clinton Foundation, right? And we've got this wonderful budget to work. Our budget is very humble, and our expenses and what we have to work with a little more meager, so we don't want to be associated with something like that. So therefore, we changed to Legacy Deo. Our mission is to impact giving that the impact life forever. Inspire giving impact life forever. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, so we do exist with some reasonable administrative fees and accounts that we manage, and some people believe in what we do, so much so that they're willing to give directly and support us by their gifts. All right. What do we do? What is it that we're here to offer as help? We offer to be individual and executor of the states. If maybe you've got a state where you've got family members that could be the executor of it, that is great, and that's fine. Not everybody has a family that can be an executor of their estate. Or if you have family, maybe they're not the right people to serve as executor because your estate's a little more complicated, or there's some family dynamics going on that make it a little bit more difficult. So we do that for folks. We also act as power of attorney for healthcare directive and also financial matters. Again, if you don't have anybody, then let the church step in. We, as a financial arm of the church, step in and help you out in that area. We're glad to do that for you. And then special and planned charitable gifts and estate planning assistance. If you haven't had an estate planner come in and help you out yet, we can sit down with you, kind of work through some of your situation and give you some direction as to what might be good options for you. We don't give you advice as much, though, because I'm a pastor, trained by the seminary. I'm not a CPA, so we encourage you, anything that you hear here, to go to your own tax professional, get their advice, and then can act on it. But if you don't have somebody, we've got a CPA back in our office that can take care of some of those things for you. And then we're a trustee for more than 400 fiduciary accounts. That fiduciary is an important word, and if you have a professional that's helping you out, a financial planner or somebody, here's my recommendation for you, is that just make sure that they're a fiduciary. A fiduciary is somebody who's legally responsible to act in your best interest. All right. What you don't want is you don't want somebody who, when you go to them and you ask them for some financial advice and let's sit down and do some estate planning, what's on their mind is what products can I sell this person? Because I'm interested in my commission, right? You don't want somebody like that. And so be careful to make sure that your financial planner, the person you sit down with, is a fiduciary, that they're going to do what's in your best interest and not for their own reception of their commissions and such like that. And then congregational and organizational endowments, we set those up too for First Good Shepherd. Let me ask you this here. Does Good Shepherd have an endowment? You guys know?
We used to have one for the school, but I don't think the church does.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, but even one for the school, that's...
Well, the school's no longer in existence.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were in the process of setting up endowments in the past.
Okay. All right.
For the school.
Well, we offer, those services for the church too. I was in Midland, Texas, and Midland, Texas is known for their oil there, big oil industry, and they're experiencing right now a bit of a low going on, and there are some congregations there that are really struggling. And what this one particular pastor said to me was, there was a time when they were doing great. Everybody in the oil business was, going full guns and everything was booming. And they said they wish that they would have set aside money during the fat years, we'll call them. Sometimes we hear that read in the Bible, for when the lean years were coming. And that's one of the things an endowment can do, is to make sure then that money is set aside that then comes in regularly and steady for whatever purpose that you set for it.
What are the tax advantages to an endowment?
Yeah, the tax advantages for an individual. Let me get to that in just a second as to how we can work that. I've got another slide. That's okay. But for congregations, let's say First Good Shepherd, if you were to have one, there wouldn't as much be a tax advantage for the organization, because First Good Shepherd's not going to pay taxes, the taxes anyway. But let me get to individuals and how they can save here in just a minute. All right. And then the other thing besides an endowment is a custodial account. Let's say, for example, an endowment would be something that would be irrevocable. All right, you set it in place, and it is there in perpetuity. It's there forever. And so that money that would sit there and grow and kick off a return would be used for whatever purpose. Let's say you want to designate it for missions or a school, Lutheran education, maybe seminary or whatever, universities, etc. For scholarships. You can do with it whatever you want. But a custodial account then is liquid. All right, that is something that you've got. I'm just going to make this up. I don't know. This is your situation, but I'm making this up. Let's say you've got $50,000 or $100,000 in a checking account. I don't know, and you know that there's a purpose for it. Someday down the road, you want to do X, Y, Z with this $50,000 or $100,000. Well, if it's sitting in a checking account, because you probably got a little bit of money sitting in your checking account, that is earning. But might as well just say nothing. Might as well say nothing. But yet, what's it losing? It's losing the cost of inflation. So your earning power on that dollar is going down, 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 especially with high inflation these days. And so a lot of churches, what they'll do is they'll invest that then in a custodial account, and that remains liquid, whereas you could call and say anytime you want to, hey, Legacy Deo, we need $25,000 for such and such. Okay, and we'll just write the check, and that's yours to do with whatever it is that you want. But in the meantime, while it's sitting there, it's not earning nothing. It's growing and invested in the market according to your wishes. Maybe it's invested conservatively, not growing quite as much, but also not as much risk. Or maybe you want to invest it aggressively, a little more risky, but at the same time brings in a greater return. All right. Additional services, donor advised funds, charitable gift annuities. I'll get to those in a minute. Family endowment funds. There are some families that set up an endowment fund for their family. Maybe it's a scholarship in the family name, or some people have done it to where they have a family reunion that's funded every year off of the money that this endowment kind of kicks off and generates. Charitable remainder trust. I'll get to those in a minute. Special non-cash gift facilitation. That's where, like in the beginning when I said that somebody wanted to donate their ranch to the church, right? Anything that's not a cash gift. I'm going to encourage you, if you have other means, and I'll talk about this in a sec, I'll get to it, to think about donating to the church, not out of your cash pocket, but out of these non-cash gift ways. It can be a great tax advantage for you. I'll come back around to that. And then other seminars and presentations. I mentioned custodial funds, endowment funds already, and then grants to donor-directed charitable causes. You've got somebody, the pastor at the seminary you want to sponsor, or you've got another organization that you want to help out. Let me tell a little bit about your estate, right? So some people think that maybe it is that you don't have an estate because you don't have as much as somebody else, right? But anything can be considered an estate. I mean, you're sitting here with shoes on your feet today, and you've got a car that you drove in. You've got an estate, and what is going to happen there with all of these things? Your retirement accounts, real estate, your assets, jewelry, whatever it might be. After you're not needing it anymore is what we want to help you with, or what we want you to start thinking about. Estate planning is important for everybody. And it involves all of these different avenues to make a holistic estate plan. All right. Estate asset distribution. You want to think of it this way, that when you pass, there's really only 3 choices as to where all of your stuff can go, right? And the first choice is your family. Now, some people include their pets in there as their loved ones, but you can't leave money to a pet. You can leave money to somebody who will be a custodian, or to take care of your pet on the pet's behalf. You can't leave money to a pet. But we want to encourage you. Some people think that, this Legacy Deo guy is just here to encourage us to, forget our family when we're... No, we don't want that at all. It's important that you remember your family in your estate plan. And that's one option as to where you can leave your money. The other option is to charity, and the government likes this. They encourage you to leave your money to charity because they recognize the good that charities do. Right? Charities are out there helping with the poor, and helping with those that don't have enough to eat or a place to live, and lots of other things that they do in the community. That's what charities do, and so the government gives you a tax break for doing so if you itemize in your taxes, right? And then the third place you can leave your money if you want to is Uncle Sam. Now, I'm getting some looks here because nobody usually wants to leave their money to Uncle Sam, but we recognize that Uncle Sam wants you to leave your money to him and wants more and more all the time.
Well, that's the default.
That's right. That's right. If you don't have a plan, you do have a plan, but the government's got a plan for you, right? They've already put one together for you. So if you don't have your own plan that supersedes theirs, then who knows what's going to happen to all of your assets. And it might be possibly in line with your wishes, and it might not be in line with what you would want with your stuff. So always good to have your own plan put in place. Let me talk a little bit about estate tax, okay? And some people have nicknamed this the death tax, right? This is the tax that is usually a second tax because you've already paid tax on this money once. And then after you pass, then what the government steps in and says that they want. Right now, the government's being very generous and saying that you have to have an estate of $12 million before the threshold, before they step in and start taxing, right? Anything over and above what you leave to your family and charity, etc. But it wasn't always this way, and I want you to think about what's going on right now in the government, and I'm not here to sway you on right or wrong or one side or the other, but the reality is the government here recently has been very, very generous, right, in giving away lots of money, all kinds of money they're giving away. And the question is that everybody should be asking is, how long can this last, and what are what's the repercussions down the road, because you've got to pay the piper at some point in time. So will this generosity from the government last, where that $12 million exclusion rate? I personally don't think so. I think that they're going to have to make some changes in order to be raising taxes and making some changes to what they allow us right now. It was in my lifetime that, not all that long ago, in yours too, as I look around the room, that the exclusion rate was only $147,000, right, here back in the 70s, $147,000. So let's pretend that somebody back at this time frame were to pass away and leave to their family $1,147,000, okay? What would happen then, if they were in the highest tax bracket, right, is that $147,000 was the exclusion rate, so no tax on that, no second tax on that. But the highest tax bracket, so this is a possible scenario, could have been up to 77%. So 77% of $1 million would have been taxed. $770,000 is what the government would have taken at this time from your family as a second tax on money you've already been taxed on to begin with. Is that crazy or what? Now that's the highest example, but still, even some of the examples that aren't that extreme are still ridiculous, right? And so we don't want to count on the estate tax being where it is today forever. That might change really soon, where the government says they're going to want more and more. Okay, anything so far before I move on? Okay. A standard or itemized deduction. Right now, they're being kind of generous too with a standard deduction. If you're an individual filing, as a single here, this is what the individual standard deduction is, $12,950. That means that if you're itemizing your deductions, right, and we just had tax time not all that long ago, a couple months ago, so you're kind of familiar with this maybe. You can add up your real estate tax, right, your interest that you pay on your mortgage, and any deductions that you might want to get from charitable giving, like what you would give to First Good Shepherd here.
You can
And
take the sales tax, there's a form for doing that.
is there?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Taxes.
Okay, all right. But all of that added up together then, if it didn't quite get to $12,950, then you would take the standard deduction, or if all those things added up individually came to more, then it would be better for you to itemize, right? Let me get to some of that. These are the things that you can certainly, and if you're saying that sales tax here is a little different, that's okay. You add that in there with it too. And what some people will do then is they will think about that itemized deduction, and let me kind of put a pin in that and come back to it a little bit. Some folks will put aside in 1 year, stack up their giving so that they can itemize in a year and save on taxes. Let me come back there. Okay, so commonly used plan giving tools, and this is where I'm going to get to an individual saving on taxes and giving into a trust. Okay. Right now, your required minimum distribution was 70.5. Now it's 72 for any kind of an IRA, your individual retirement account. Right. This is where the government says we have a joint account, and it's 72. We want our share, the government would say, and so you have to take a required minimum distribution out of that, so that we can have our tax. That's okay, but maybe you don't want to do that. So this would be a case where you might think about a qualified charitable distribution instead of, and I said earlier, instead of thinking about how it is that you want to give to First Good Shepherd, and I'm going to make up a number here. Let's say, for example, you would give to First Good Shepherd $10,000 this year. Okay, you're already going to give $10,000 to the church. Why give that money out of your pocket full of cash when the government then taxes that cash, when you might have the choice of giving through a qualified charitable distribution, because you got that required minimum distribution from your IRA. If you take that and put it in your pocket, then you've got to pay the tax on it. Instead, do a direct transfer right from your IRA over to the charity. First Good Shepherd might be the recipient there, and you give your $10,000 that way. The government sees zero of that tax from that money, because what you've done then is you've taken a tax deferred account, money that you didn't pay tax on in the beginning. The government was waiting until you cashed it in to get their tax money. But if you give it straight to charity, then that's the loophole, and you get to avoid that tax altogether. And one option of saving the tax is maybe the charity, you would give it into a trust, maybe you would give it into maybe even just a direct cash account, and that's okay. And the same thing can be done with stocks, by the way, or land. Let's say you have stocks that have appreciated and that you don't want to pay the capital gains tax on the stocks, right? Well, you've got to cash them in at some point. Instead of cashing them in and putting the money in your pocket, then Uncle Sam comes in and says we want our tax, which is quite high if you're thinking about all that capital gains on the appreciated value of the stock. Save your cash and don't give that to the church, but give the appreciated stocks directly to the church, right? And then you avoid all of that tax money of the government coming in and taking in the tax from the capital gains. So now you can actually give First Good Shepherd more by giving less, or give them the same, or you see what I'm saying there. You give them more by not costing you quite as much, because you're not having to give the government their cut. I'm not anti-government. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be paying our taxes. I think we should, but I don't think that we should be paying more than our fair share. If there are ways that the government has said this is legal, this is one way to go ahead, managing the finances, then let's take advantage of that if we can do so without paying as much tax as possible. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but let's not give to Caesar what belongs to our family, and let's not give to Caesar what belongs to the church. All right. Anything there? Sometimes I go kind of fast. That's all right. All right. Other commonly used plan giving tools. Another one is payable upon death, your beneficiary designation. If you have an IRA or you set up some other accounts, a lot of times they'll ask you for a first beneficiary or a second beneficiary. This is who you want that money to go to in case of your passing. So you can set that up directly, and that does not go through probate. So it doesn't get handled, through your. It's just a direct transfer, right? So my IRA account, they know to give it directly to my sister, so forth. Okay. Last will and testament, commonly used plan giving tool number 3. It is surprising out there when I go around and I give these talks, is that how many people don't have a will, or how many folks don't have one that's complete, or maybe it's old and outdated and it doesn't cover everything, right? That sometimes happens too. These things need to be updated on a regular basis. And so it is that we want to help you put together your will, and your options are this, right? You can pay an attorney, which I've heard here, and I think you're going to get some announcements. I don't have the information right now, but I've heard that First Good Shepherd has an attorney here that's been doing work for them, for you, free of charge. Free of charge. A wonderful guy who's got a relationship with the congregation. If you need an attorney, I would advise you to go to him. And again, don't have his name and number now, but I think your deacon is going to announce who that is, and maybe some of you know.
Tim O'Reilly.
Tim O'Reilly, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so go there if you want to put together a will. Some people will charge a flat fee, and some people out there will charge by the hour. And for the ones that charge by the hour, this is what we encourage, is we have a planning tool on our website, free of charge. We don't charge anything for it. That'll walk you through step by step everything that you need to kind of think about and consider. Because what you don't want to do, if you and your spouse are sitting there in front of the attorney that's charging by the hour, is have them ask a question and then have you two, and the clock's ticking, all right? And they're charging, and then you two are deciding what you, oh, well, let's talk about that, and then they're just kicking back and the meter's running. So this plan giving tool helps you walk through all the decisions ahead of time, and then you just come to the guy who's charging by the hour, put the document on their desk, and you say, there you go. That's everything that you need. Now go ahead and take care of. And then if there's little minor detailed questions, then they can ask. A holographic will is something that is an option. This is one that you put in your own handwriting. You would just scribble down on a piece of paper or something like that. I don't know in Nevada what it is that the law is, so you'd have to check me on this one. But I know in Texas, a holographic will is legal. You can put it in your own writing. The trouble is that a lot of folks will leave stuff out, or it's unclear in some way because of the language that you use. So we don't recommend you doing this unless it's an extreme situation. Again, that information is for Texas. Does not need two witnesses. I don't know about here in this state. Internet resources. You can go to a couple of internet resources, LegalZoom and freewill.com. So it doesn't have to cost you a thing to put together your will. The trouble with that is, I can't tell you that these are recommended because sometimes you get what you pay for. But they are an option that's out there. I'm just kind of going through the options for you. LegalZoom.com and freewill.com. All right. And name an executor. Once you pass, then what happens is your executor would take a copy of your death certificate, and they take letters testamentary from the courthouse, and then they can go to the bank, let's say. And the bank would say, "Oh, okay, I see the death certificate. I see the the court documents. You can have access to, if you're the executor, Jane's bank account or whatever it is that you have to take care of." That's the way that works. And go ahead and stop me right on through if you've got any questions or you want me to go back and explain something further. That is fine. Okay, I mentioned that we've got the will planning guide on our website, legacydeo.org, and that is downloadable free of charge. Another tool on our website that I encourage you to take advantage of is what's called the Red Book. The Red Book. And these days, what you need, I'm telling you, you are doing your family such a favor if you would make a detailed account of every single bank account that you have, every financial institution, right? All the passwords to get into those, because a lot of these things are done online these days, that they would need to know. And don't forget about leaving your family the password to your phone. The password to your phone. A lot of folks, don't think about that one. When I was a kid, a couple of reasons here. When I was a kid, Mom, she would have her address book right next to the phone in the living room, and it was one of those rotary dial phones, right? And it had the long cord that you could go anywhere in the house with it. And the address book was right there, and we all knew that if we ever needed to get a hold of Aunt Jenny or Uncle Max or whoever in the family, we'd go to Mom's address book. a lot of folks aren't keeping a physical address book anymore, right? Where they've got their address book in here. And what you don't want is you don't want somebody to not get invited to the funeral, which happens because they don't know how to contact all the family members, right? And so that's important that you give somebody access to the phone. And also for this reason, a lot of accounts, companies, financial institutions, etc., are going to two-factor authentication these days. And so not only do you have to give a password, but then they send a authorization code to your phone, and then you've got to type that in to make sure that you have access to that account. Well, what if the person trying to handle your affairs can't get into? So you see how important that is. The red book is a list then that you would leave for your loved ones to be able to take care of all of those things. And my sister, she lives in Texas too. She knows the combination to my safe, and she knows that if anything happens to me, she just comes to my house, gets in the safe, and there will be the list of all my bank accounts and passwords, and my will is there, and my wishes for life support and all that kind of stuff, all in one place in my safe. Now she can't get into my house right now. She might have to kick in a window. but I told her, I said, Cindy, my sister's name, I said, Cindy, if something happens to me, throw a brick through the window and just crawl in. Who cares at that point, right? I don't care about the window. So she can get in. She'll get in some way or another, but she knows the combination. I promise.
He wants some security and privacy.
Well,
He wants some security and privacy from his sister.
that's true. Yeah, I don't want her to have a key
You
today,
see, if
but
the window's broken, he knows who did it.
that's a good point. That's a good point. Oh man. All right, and I'm leaving her enough money anyway that she can have that window replaced. It'll be just fine. It'll be just fine. Okay, and then also talk to your pastor here about setting up and making a list of your funeral arrangements. When it comes time for you to pass and your family is undergoing such a time of stress and difficulty, another thing to add to the list, you don't want them to be going through and, oh, what was mom's confirmation verse and what do you think dad's favorite hymns were and all these kinds of things as they're putting together your funeral arrangements. Write all that down ahead of time. Make sure your pastor has a copy. Make sure he knows about that. That's really a good estate planning tool too. All right? Some folks don't like to think about all these things, but the truth is not everybody is going to get married in their lifetime, and not everybody is going to have kids when thinking about these big major events in life. But guess what everybody is going to experience someday, unless the Lord comes back first. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. Yep. So let's plan for it. Let's plan for it. Commonly used plan giving tool number 4 is life insurance. Some people need life insurance. Some people don't. The folks that need life insurance is you want to think about, what will my family do? Will they be okay? Be able to support themselves, etc. After I pass? And if they can't, if they're relying on your income, maybe life insurance is something that you want to think about. Maybe you've got to a point where you don't need life insurance anymore. Your family doesn't need that anymore. Some people then will consider leaving at least a portion, if not the whole thing, to the church. It's another great way to be able to fund the ministry of First Good Shepherd and what it is that the church here wants to do. A couple of different ways to do that is to name First Good Shepherd as a beneficiary in the policy. Let's say 90% of your life insurance policy would go to your kids, and 10%, kind of like a tithe, would go to First Good Shepherd. Or maybe you want to give the whole thing to First Good Shepherd, especially if there's a cash value in that life insurance policy. And there's a couple of different ways that people do that. Sometimes they will leave it for First Good Shepherd. Sometimes they'll give that gift immediately and you can receive the tax benefit from it immediately then. And First Good Shepherd then could hold on to it according to your wishes, and maybe it is that you would even fund every year the premium, give to First Good Shepherd, let's say it's $1,000 a year for the premium, then you would give $1,000 to First Good Shepherd and say that's designated for pay the life insurance policy, so that when I die, then First Good Shepherd, you get the whole thing. Okay, what there? Did you have anybody? Okay. So just lots of options to think about, right? Ways that you can fund, not only take care of family, but also the faith part of your legacy after you leave. All right, so I've gone through this, gone through that. Oh, it's kind of a funny one. The insured must have consent and insurable interest. So I can't take out a life insurance policy on Frank Sinatra. Okay, you know, let's say, and yeah, okay, and just anybody out there. You can't just pick anybody. You can't take out a life insurance policy on Pastor Beckman, you know, without his consent and without there being insurable interest out there. Otherwise, people would be doing that, and right. But there has to be some kind of a link there. All right, other plan giving tools. Everything that I've talked about so far is revocable, amendable during the donor's lifetime. So let's say your life insurance policy or your will is in place or whatever else might be, and then next year you say, oh, I want to make some changes to that. You can, no problem whatsoever, all right? Allows continuity of ownership, especially as your needs change and your financial situation changes. Allows percentage gifts, 10% to the church, 90% to the family, or 50-50, or however you want to do it, depending on. Provides estate tax savings, and I've already talked about that a bit. Okay, now I want to get into the fun stuff. This is cool. This is really neat. I asked you before to kind of keep in mind and put a pin in when I was talking about the stacking up your itemized deductions. Remember, I was talking about your standard deductions versus your itemized deductions. Some people do this, all right? This is what's called a donor-advised fund. And a donor-advised fund is when you give a chunk of, can be cash, but sometimes it's also funded by your IRA, required minimum distribution, or appreciated stocks, or appreciated land, etc., that you don't want to pay the capital gains tax on. You want to avoid all those capital gains tax. You can put it into a donor-advised fund, and a donor-advised fund is where you get the tax deduction immediately. Now, for example, there was a situation where there was a church in Texas that was thinking about a building project. They wanted to build a new sanctuary, all right? They were going to have a voters meeting, architectural submitting plans and all kinds of design work and such like that. They were going to have a voters meeting in February or March. But here it was in December where somebody wanted to make a tax-deductible gift immediately, right? Because they needed the tax deduction that calendar year, and it's December. But they don't know whether or not the church is actually going to vote and approve this building fund, so they don't know whether to give it to the church for that purpose or to do something else with it. A donor-advised fund is where you can give it to an account, you get the tax deduction immediately, and then let's say we at Legacy Dale would hold on to it there. We would invest it as you direct. Maybe you want it invested conservatively so there's no risk. Maybe you want it invested more aggressively so that there's more gain there to it. We would invest it. It would sit there and grow for as long as you need it to. And then when the church votes, yes, we're going to do the building project, you just call Legacy Deo and say, hey, I want you to send a check over to First Good Shepherd or whatever this church is, or the seminary or whoever you want to give it to, and give them $10,000, $20,000, whatever it might be. Or you can, and this is where we go back to the stacking of the itemized deduction versus the standard deduction, there are some people that will take a few years worth of giving to the church, right? And let's say they were going to give $10,000 a year. They'll put $30,000 in the donor advised fund. Now they're way beyond that standard deduction. They can itemize deductions for the calendar year that they need the big tax break. And they don't want the church, though, to have all $30,000 at one shot. They want to be able to give the church $30,000, $10,000 a year over the next 3 years. Well, it sits there in that donor advised fund and grows, and you just call up and say, hey, it's January 1st, I want $10,000 to go to the church this year, and then next January 1st, I want $10,000 to go to the church, or monthly installments, whatever you want to do. Donor advised fund is a really cool vehicle to be able to do a lot of things like that. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Is a 401k or a 403b different than an IRA?
So an IRA,
To having to make contributions or pay taxes.
Yeah. So an IRA is the general term for all of that. For your 403b, for your 401k, for all those different types of things. They're all IRAs, individual retirement accounts. So individually then, 403b is usually just like a 401k, but it's more of maybe a nonprofit, side of things. And then you also want to think about the option within those. Sometimes your plan might offer a Roth versus a non-Roth option. And so if you're not doing a Roth, what it is, that's tax deferred. So you don't pay tax now, and then it sits there and it grows and grows and grows. And more money grows because you didn't have to take out any tax. But the catch is with that option, well, when you take it out, right, everything gets taxed. And two things. One, if you're in a higher tax bracket because your income has increased way down the road, then you're not only going to possibly get a higher tax because the government has increased the taxes right down the road, but you could also move into a higher tax bracket because your income and your assets are just accumulated more and your income's increased. So it kind of two ways that it's possible that they would get you. We don't know that taxes are going to increase down the road. But again, going back to the government has been so generous lately. I was just listening to a podcast here recently with the guy that used to work for the government. Anyway, a lot of folks think that the government can do nothing but raise taxes from here in the future if they want to remain solvent without going under, or borrow our way to death, right? And you know what our debt is right now? It's terrible. And I think that, and this is just Jay Brown talking. This is not advice that something that's going to. I think that some of these other countries that are holding notes on some of our debts are going to own a piece of the United States of America real soon, maybe much more than we want them to have. Okay, so I think we're in trouble. I do. And raising taxes might be the only way out of it. And if somebody does that, then these tax deferred accounts, you're going to get hit big when you decide to take them out, to take the money out. And you have to take the money out at 72 right now. And who knows? They could raise or lower that amount. And the reason why it's scary is imagine the two of us are going into business together. Okay, we're going to open up a pizza shop. Okay, and we open up a pizza shop, and today we're 50-50 partners. But I reserve the right down the road to change my percentage of the partnership. Maybe down the road, I reserve the right to increase my portion to 60% or 70%. How does that sound? It doesn't sound very fair. It doesn't sound right. But that's exactly the kind of partnership that you have with the government when it comes to these tax-deferred accounts. They reserve the right to increase their share down the road without any notice whatsoever. And so if they raise taxes, they get more of a share, and you can't plan as well for your retirement as you did before.
And your RMD can make more of your Social Security taxable.
Yes, yes, exactly. You got to worry about that too, right? Yeah. Is your Social Security going to be taxable?
5% can be taxed.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. This tax deferred business, they know that they're going to get their money one way or the other unless you make those direct qualified charitable distributions. That's why I encourage you, don't give to the church. There's more to that. Don't give to the church out of your cash. Give to the church out of your those non-cash assets, and if you can save the tax, right? Transfer over your stocks, transfer over your retirement account, transfer over your things without it going through the government's hands first. Another way to do that is a charitable remainder trust, and individuals can set something like this up. Let's say, for example, I've got all this land that has been passed, and this happens a lot in Texas, but I've got all this land that's been passed down from generation to generation, or I'm a farmer or whatever, and I don't think my kids use that land anymore. They're not going to go into farming. They've moved away. They've got their own thing that they want to do. Or maybe a scenario where you've got stocks that have appreciated, so much, and you don't want to pay the capital gains tax, whatever it might be. You can put that money into a trust, right? And so we call it a charitable remainder trust here. So the donor would then fund that basket with land or stocks or maybe cash. And you say to yourself, I'm not done with that money yet. I still need part of it to live on. I don't want to give all of it away because I need it. Well, that's okay. This charitable remainder trust can then not only give you a partial tax deduction for that donation immediately, so you save on taxes right away, but then also then it can pay you for your lifetime regular payments. And the regular payments that it pays you for your lifetime can look at one of two different ways. Charitable remainder trust, those are usually invested with the market. And again, you can decide whether it's invested conservatively or more at risk, right, for a higher return. And your payment, regular payment, will fluctuate. Makes sense. If it's invested in the market, maybe this month you get a little less because the market's down, and 2020, your payments would have been because the market's up. That's fine. Charitable gift annuity, same kind of thing, a lot of similarities, but the annuity is a steady fixed payment where you are guaranteed that amount for the rest of your life. So if, let's say it ends up being, and I'm going to make up a number here, let's say it's $5,000 a month for the rest of your life. If you live to be 172, we would guarantee you that, until 172, you're going to get that $5,000 every single month for the rest of your life. Whereas this one is invested in the market, might go up and down a little bit. This one, you are going to get that amount. With a charitable remainder trust, let's say, for example, you say, well, not only do I need that money, but I want to make sure that if I pass away first, my spouse gets taken care of, right? Well, that's fine. The spouse can receive those regular payments too. And then let's say you would think, well, I also want to take care of my kids, and maybe you pick a period of time like 20 years and you would say, I want my kids to receive the same payment for 20 years until I know that they're on their feet and they're well taken care of and so forth like that. Then, after I'm done, I've received the money, my spouse has received the money from the trust, my kids have received the money from the trust. Then after all of that's done, then you name your charity and say, then whatever's left over, whatever's in remainder, First Good Shepherd would receive the balance of that money. And it's a good way to take care of both family and faith at the same time. So these are good options for you and great tax advantaged options for you. Again, it's about not giving Uncle Sam more than what is due. And the government's the one that sets up all these rules. We're not doing anything funny or fishy here. They're the one that put these rules in place. We're just playing by their rules when we do these things. Our legacy, when you give, Legacy Deo is not necessarily got a horse in the race. I mean, don't get us wrong. We would love it if you would consider us as part of your estate plan, but that's not our first primary goal here. Our goal is to inspire giving that impacts life forever. And that giving, as you've heard me say over and over again, can be to your church, First Good Shepherd. Great. We would be pleased if you would include First Good Shepherd in your estate plan, if you would include the seminary and Lutheran education and Lutheran World Relief, whatever you want to give, that's great. And some of these are some different options that many people have set up trusts and accounts and such. We regularly give money to the LWML and universities and seminaries, church extension funds, etc., as beneficiaries. We have, as of 2020, $3.4 million of assets that are been given away to these organizations through charitable giving, and over 63 million given away to these organizations since 1960, and again across 32 states. Okay, I'm going to wind down and ask for your questions and any comments before we wrap up, but let you know that I've got a table out in the front of the entrance area. And if you are interested in some information, you want to talk a little bit later about some specifics, fill out one of the cards and give them to me and we'll get back with you. Or pick up some brochures. I've got information out there too about some options and so forth that you might want to explore further. And again, talk to your tax professional and then get their advice too. Don't just listen to Jay Brown. But if you need somebody further to help you with things, we at Legacy Dale would be happy to help. Let me kind of go through this and that. And it's our board of directors. I'm going to leave it. Okay, questions, comments? Yeah.
If you only have one person you're going to give your money to and you have a good, viable will, do you need a trust?
You don't need a trust, but maybe you would consider a trust if, let's say, for example, I've got a family member who received money from, not my father, but kind of a distant anyway. Their father passed away and did not want them to have all of the inheritance at once. So the money went into a trust, just an option, where they would get a third of it at 30 years old, a third of it at 40, and a third of it at 50 years old. There's some different stipulations. It could be, money could be taken out if they wanted to go back to school for higher education and things like that. So you wouldn't need a trust, but maybe
A will would be, I read right now, a trust could be distributed.
Yeah, a trust would have a custodian.
Okay.
So, and Legacy Deo could be that custodian where the money is put into a trust. It doesn't belong to, let's say, you have a son or daughter?
Daughter.
Oh, okay, what's her name?
Christina.
Okay, Christina. Let's say that right now you were through a will to give everything to Christina. She would have, and I'll make this up, $1 million today.
Good.
Right? And if you put it into a trust where Legacy Deo was the custodian, we would hold and manage that $1 million, and it would,
Okay.
kind of to grow and as it's invested as you wished. And anytime Christina needed anything, she'd just call up Legacy Deo and say, my rent needs to be paid this month, or whatever stipulations you put in that trust were within the boundaries, and we would write the checks.
Right.
No problem. Yep.
Big advantage of the trust is it doesn't go into probate.
Yeah.
That's
I was
right.
just gonna
Yes,
say-
right. And also, you're not going to see those that inheritance tax, depending on the the level of the trust. But again, even though the inheritance tax exclusion rate is at $12 million today, don't count on it being. Don't say to yourself, "Well, I only have $11,900,000, and so it's not going to count." you don't know that tomorrow the government's not going to lower that exclusion rate and go back to a much higher tax bracket for that death tax. So, yes, yeah, maybe you would want to set up a trust
Yeah.
so it wouldn't go through probate. You're right.
I have a trust, I've had it since January 23rd, 1987. Revocable.
Yeah.
My second oldest son is a successor trustee to me, and then the oldest son is just another successor trustee. The account, my bank account, is in the name of the trust. I had to set up a separate one just to get a Visa card,
Sure.
because the trust can't have a credit card.
Yeah.
And my house, my home where I live, is in the, I don't own it, it's in the
You
trust.
don't. Yeah.
I own my car.
Okay. And that's good to keep those in separate names like that. Yeah.
You know what Robbie Preifogel did with her car? She made she declared a dependent, and so 30 days after she passed, I was able to give the title to the person she named as a dependent, and it was the easiest transfer. Just letting you know that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just seamless. Like,
If you
she was
plan
an expert at death, I'm not gonna lie. She had it all done.
If you plan ahead, you can make this easy on your family. And this isn't, well, that's a little bit of guilt coming from me now. But if you love your family, you give them the gift of planning ahead. Boy, I've seen terrible things out there where, and maybe it's not intentional, maybe it's misunderstandings. Misunderstandings happen, and then there's tension in a family because, well, I thought Dad wanted this, and well, I think I heard Dad say that, and
I think, aren't trusts a little bit better at navigating that kind of thing?
they are.
Will?
They are. They certainly.
I
Yep,
feel like
that's the
I feel like
case.
they are.
Mhm.
We had wills and we had durable powers of attorney too.
Yep, all those are important.
There's one big package.
And I don't know if any of you are aware, but if you have your durable power of attorney for medical or financial, you can put that in the Nevada lockbox, and then anybody in the hospital network here can access it and know.
Oh, wonderful.
So once you have that drawn up, place it in the Nevada lockbox so that whoever
Great.
has that power has no trouble exercising it if you are, were hit by a bus and are unconscious and not able to make your own decision.
One last note I'll leave you with too is if you think to yourself that your estate is not large enough to be talking about some of these options here, two things with that. One, once you start adding up, a diamond ring, a car, it doesn't have to be big. These things add up fast, and you might have more than you think you do. And then the second thing, though, is to handle some of these accounts for you. Legacy Deo, our minimum is much less than many others. $10,000 is our minimum to set up a trust account or some sort of an endowment or maybe and so most commonly out there it's $25,000 or $50,000 for a lot of these things, and ours is only 10. So again, we're trying to give a service to the church and the congregation members is the reason why we do it at such a low amount. So if you have any needs like that, please grab a card. Love to be able to follow up with you and help you out. Okay.
Thank you.
God bless you, and look forward to seeing. Is it 10:30?
Yeah.
That we're gonna okay.
Yeah,
10:30 in the church. All right, great.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.